Hi guys, and welcome to another batch of your replays. Today's theme is prototypes. I'm featuring two tanks that were merely just prototypes, and we are kicking off with this game here on Stalingrad with Phen0menaL. I'm sorry I had to do that. It's one of my favorite songs from my childhood. I couldn't resist. But anyway, as I say, we're here with Phen0menaL here on Stalingrad, and he's driving the WZ-111, which is one of two prototypes. That's today's theme. Two prototype tanks on the channel in today's video. This is the first of them. It is the Chinese Tier 9 heavy tank, and as it's the first time it's featuring on the channel, I might as well talk a little bit about the tank. And yeah, like I say, it was a prototype. It was developed in the early 1960s. First prototype and only prototype was finished in 1964. Now, I featured the 110 on the channel recently. That's the Tier 8 Chinese heavy tank, and I was basically saying that the 110 was a way of converting China's IS-2 fleet of tanks into something more similar to the IS-3 and basically modernizing them. Well, this tank is a way of converting the IS-3 and modernizing it into something that was more like the IS-10, basically updating it. So this is basically an upgraded IS-3 that was going to be direct competition to Russia's IS-10. Now, the IS-10 later became known as the T-10, which is in-game, and you're probably familiar with. So this is a Tier 9 Chinese heavy tank equivalent to the T-10, and it goes up against the T-10 in World of Tanks as well, as the T-10 is a Tier 9 Russian heavy tank, or at least one of them. So yeah, why is this a prototype? Why didn't it make it past prototype stage? Well, it all came down to the engine and also the changing face of tank warfare at the time. The engine simply just wasn't powerful enough to drive the tank. It didn't give the tank the speed or mobility that the Chinese engineers were looking for. The engine was also considered to be far too exposed and susceptible to damage from maybe air bursts or shots from the side and rear, and as a result it never got any further. And there were other problems with the tank as well. The hull armor on the tank was stripped down to try and give the tank more mobility. So the hull armor, just like the T-10 in real life, the hull armor on the WZ-111 is actually weaker than it is on its Tier 8 counterpart. So the hull armor on the 111 is worse than it is on the 110, just like the hull armor on the T-10 is a little bit worse than it is on the IS-3 for the Russians. But like I say, at the time, the armor, or the focus, wasn't so much on armor, it was more on mobility, and unfortunately the engine just couldn't deliver on mobility even though the armor was stripped down or weakened on the hull. So yeah, as far as compared to the Chinese 110, it's got weaker hull armor. But what it does have is very good turret armor, and this tank is all about its gun. This tank is really all about its gun. What makes the WZ-111 a monster is the fact it comes with a 100, although this says it's 100mm here, but what makes this tank, I actually did not realize that Phen0menaL was actually using it's the 100mm, so he's actually using the stock gun. The final gun on the WZ-111 is what makes this tank an absolute monster. Because it's a 130mm gun, and it's basically the same gun that comes on the IS-7 at Tier 10 for the Russians. It's a copy of the gun that's on the IS-7, 130mm on a Tier 9 heavy. That basically gives it, I believe it's either the highest or the second highest alpha of all the Tier 9 heavy tanks in the game, and it also means that the DPM, even though the rate of fire is not, its typical heavy tank rate of fire, because it's got more alpha damage at Tier 9, it means that the DPM of the WZ-111 is actually higher than most other Tier 9 heavies. So it's got good DPM, it's got a great Tier 10 gun on a Tier 9 tank, and it's got very good turret armor. The downside, as I say, is the hull armor is not amazing. It's only really effective against lower tier tanks. Any tank that has roughly about 220mm of penetration should be able to penetrate the front of this tank, and the lower glacis is traditionally weak, like it is on a lot of Chinese tanks. In real life, the tank was also rejected because it was just far too small inside. The crew were very confined. There wasn't a lot of room for the crew to move around. And in game, maybe that's reflected as well, because even though I haven't driven this tank before, reports are that basically when this tank gets hit, it takes a lot of crew damage, it takes a lot of module damage, maybe because the crew are so tightly confined in the same spot. So The tank is not without its problems, but it's all about this gun. And I forgot to mention it also gets 5 degrees of gun depression, so the gun depression is not good. But what is good is the turret armor and the gun are phenomenal, although we're not going to see Phen0menaL actually use the final gun in this replay. I just realized I had a quick glance at this replay earlier on, and I didn't even realize he was using the stock gun, which makes this replay even more impressive. We're going to go. Phen0menaL is here on Stalingrad, and it's a tier 10 game. 4 tier 10s on the on the enemy team. So does that mean that Phen0menaL is actually using the stock turret? I'm not quite sure. As I say, I have not driven this tank myself yet. I believe that I either have unlocked it or I actually bought it, but just have never played it because I've got other tanks I'm working towards at the moment. But Phen0menaL is doing the usual typical heavy tank thing here on Stalingrad. He's moving down to the 2-3 lines. He's going to be supporting his IS-7, which if this was fully upgraded, it would have a gun that's as good as, if not better. It's actually slightly better stats-wise than the IS-7 at tier 10 for the Russians, but Phen0menaL is moving up with his 215mm of penetration on his 100mm gun. I don't play when I get to higher tier tanks. It takes a lot for me to determine whether or not a higher tier tank is worth playing. But T-54, the 215mm of penetration should be enough to go through the side of the T-54. There's also a Bulldog, surprisingly, on this flank. Really surprised to see a Bulldog here. I would have thought the Bulldog was going to be on the 9-0 lines. But Phen0menaL has lots of support. There's a T-57 Heavy, IS-7 is here. We've got a light tank, or there's an AMX 1375 over here as well. What's he doing over here? Tiger 2, T-28 prototype. Okay, lots of support. It doesn't look as if the enemy have sent too many tanks, but there have been a couple of tanks spotted further down. Oh, never mind. There's the T-10. There's the Russian equivalent of this tank, or the whole reason this tank was developed. When the Russians began developing the T-10, that's the whole point, or the whole reason the Chinese developed the WZ-111-14. This prototype still exists, by the way, while we're waiting for Phen0menaL to get into the action. This prototype actually was built, it does exist. It's in the Beijing Tank Museum. So only one was ever built, but it still exists, and there you go, there's that stock gun. Oh! Shot from behind, cheeky T-54 biding his time, waiting for the friendlies to basically be distracted by that KV-4, but really what you're seeing Phen0menaL do now here is he's protecting the rear of the T-57 Heavy. He drove up, he realizes how important the tier 10 Heavy is in this lineup, and he drove out, kept his tank across the rear of the T-57, protecting it, and wow, he kept his patience, took a shot into the T-54. There's the first damage he's done. Only 317. And you can see that the armor on the WZ-111 is not amazing. He is angled, and it is a slight pike nose, but can't actually see where he was pinned here. But T-54 had no problems going through. Side scraping, Object 140, and oh! Unfortunately, Phen0menaL took more damage. He's taking a lot of damage for very, very little done in return here at the beginning of the game. T-54 is moving up, Phen0menaL swinging the turret round. And that T-54, I don't know what that T-54 was doing. He was a one-hit kill. Rolls out in front of Phen0menaL's gun. That was a big mistake. And, oh, another big shot from the Object 140 and Phen0menaL. Phen0menaL's losing a lot of health very, very quickly. It's not a good start to the game, but what you can see here is the acceleration is not amazing. It takes a while to accelerate, but good enough. The lack of alpha damage on the stock gun is not enough to track the Object 140, but he's moving up, looking for a second shot into the rear. Gets it. Now he's reverse side scraping. No, he's turned his front to the Object 140 again, swinging around. Gets another shot, this time tracks the 140. Very, very good shot, tracking him in place. That 140's going nowhere. And for some reason the 140 didn't shoot. Maybe he was ammo racked, or maybe he had a dead loader or something, but there is the first kill for Phen0menaL. He's up to 1440 damage. The T-10 is just fired, and I like what Phen0menaL is doing here. He knew the T-10 had fired. He drove in front of the tank, got to his sides, aimed below the spaced armor, above the tracks in order to guarantee the kill. Panther 2 in the distance. And I would have thought that might have been a hit and a kill, but don't know where that shot went. It's possible it bounced. Only 215mm of penetration on this gun. I tell you what, I wouldn't be playing that. Phen0menaL is a brave guy. I would not be playing the WZ-111 with this gun. I mean, it's okay on the 110, a little bit lackluster, especially up against higher tier tanks, and to use it on the 111 when you're guaranteed to see far more tier 9s and far more tier 10s every game, I don't think I'd be doing that. But as I say, I play World of Tanks my own way, and I don't know whether that was server lag or what that was, but really badly aimed shot there. And you could see that the acceleration is not and a second shot way behind the target. I don't know whether this is replay, whether it's a replay bug, or whether or not Phen0menaL is suffering from... Oh, that one was good. Don't know whether he's suffering from server lag, but those shots looked pretty easy to land, and those shots went at least 2 or 3 meters behind the enemy tank. But Phen0menaL finally gets his man, and I love the fact he's using the mini-map here. He side scrapes, 62A misses. He didn't advance. He basically did the work he needed to do. That killed 5, 6 enemy tanks on the 1-2 lines, and then Phen0menaL came back. He's going to take a hit here. And yeah, you could pretty much see that every single tank that has shot the WZ-111-1-4 has benned. Again, I wouldn't have driven out in front because the T-62A would have could have been reloaded, could have had another shot. But the 111 manages to pick up the kill number 4, 2k damage with a stock gun. Oh, this is just so much more impressive now that I know the gun is stock. He moves up, takes out the Mutts for kill number 5. His team are winning 12-10. Still a couple of dangerous tanks left on the enemy team. IS-7 on a lot of health, T-54E1 is on a lot of health. Object 430 hanging around at the back, but we know where all, according to the minimap, we know where every single remaining enemy tank is. And his team need help. This IS-7 is eating the Tiger II alive. Beautiful shot below the spaced armor over the tracks. Once again, Phen0menaL definitely knows where he's shooting. But they're starting to lose tanks. The enemy team have pulled it back to 12-11. WZ doesn't, or the IS-7 doesn't really want to pull out in front of the 111. Tiger II is sitting side on to the IS-7, but trying to use cover. Yeah, it's not looking good. It is now 3 versus 3, so we've got a tier 10, a tier 9, and a tier 8 versus 3 tier 10s, but now things are looking a little bit better. Good work by the T-57 Heavy. Tiger II loses a lot of health. But as I say, if the WZ-111 had actually been using the final gun, and there's that lack of penetration, that lack of alpha damage, he does track the IS-7. 110 is a one-hit kill, but he takes out the Tiger II, or the 430 is a one-hit kill, but he takes out the Tiger II. IS-7's tracks are back up. And a beautiful shot with APCR into the lower glacis on the IS-7. You can sense that Phen0menaL really wants to go help the T-57, but he can't drive out in front of this IS-7 because IS-7 could potentially one-hit kill him, even though he's on 556 health. The IS-7 with a high roll could almost certainly, or potentially, one-hit kill him. And the T-57 goes down. And now it leaves Phen0menaL alone against 2 enemy tanks, one of which is a horrible IS-7. Bad angle to shoot the lower glacis at, but the IS-7 rolls out, takes a hit, gets tracked. And you can see that Phen0menaL is using his turret armor, trying to trick the IS-7 into firing. There's that great turret armor, bounces the IS-7, puts a shot in. I don't think this Object 140 realizes that Phen0menaL is using the stock gun. He does not realize, the 430 did not realize that Phen0menaL was using the stock gun. Phen0menaL gets a really good kill. The IS-7's on 109 health, but again, frontally, you can see that Phen0menaL's out of premium ammunition, so trying to kill this IS-7 with a frontal shot, 215mm of penetration, still going to have problems. So Phen0menaL is trying to do some side scraping, trying to get the IS-7 to come around. He does have 3 HE shells loaded, but it is 1v1. Tier 8 stock gun versus IS-7. Never a good position to find yourself in. And the IS-7 knows what he's doing. The IS-7's on 5 kills as well, so Phen0menaL's already picked up his top gun. IS-7's looking for his top gun, but Phen0menaL has switched to HE. He does 7 damage, tracks the IS-7 in place. He's trying to go for maybe engine shots, fire, module damage, 18 damage. I'm wondering if the IS-7 is thinking that maybe Phen0menaL is he's out of AP. But he blocks the IS-7, bounces the IS-7, there's that great turret armor again, fires his last HE shot, once again gets to the side, avoids the tracks, avoids the spaced armor, takes the kill for kill number 7. There's 3,700 damage done in Stalingrad, tier 9, with a stock tier 8 gun in a tier 10 game. Really well played, Phen0menaL, and I had no idea it was the stock gun first time I watched this replay this morning. So what a good job by Phen0menaL. He picked up an ace tanker. I mean, I don't play tier 9 tanks. I don't play higher tier tanks if they're stock. But Phen0menaL shows that it is possible. It is possible to get results, even in a WZ-111 with the stock gun. He also picked up a top gun. Very, very well played. 1405 XP overall. Very, very good XP total. 3,700 damage done. 7 kills. Really well played. 27 shots fired. 23 hits. 18 bans. And then again, you know, he did have to fire through his premium ammo, but you know, you got to do that when you've only got 215 millimeters of penetration in a tier 10 game. So decent damage. He damaged 8, destroyed 7, did 143 assistance damage because he was shooting everything he was spotting himself. Got pretty unlucky. I have no idea why he was missing those easy shots on the AMX Scout, but yeah, it was a decent performance, and he ended up making a loss because he had to fire through his premium ammo. Ended up having to take out an IS-7 with 3 HE shells and an AP shell at the end, but lost 23,000 credits. But you know, you can't complain if you get results like that. I don't mind taking credit losses either. 1405 XP on a first win of the day times 3. I'm happy to see. Left him on 4,215 with a standard account. Really interesting game. I've never featured this channel or this tank on the channel before. I've never actually played this tank myself. I am looking forward to it, but I don't think I'm as brave as you, Phen0menaL. I don't think I'm going to be playing this tank with that gun, even though you showed me how to do it. Well played, sir. Next up, we've got a very quick game here on Ensk in the A-43 from Brynje. Now, Brynje normally doesn't send me replays unless they are very, very good. And this was a very good result in the A-43. But it also fit in with my theme today. I was looking for a tank that happened to be a prototype. And that's exactly what this tank is. The A-43, or as it's also known, is the T-34M. The T-34M being an upgraded T-34. You could see that from the frontal sloping on the front of the tank. Now in 1941, even though the T-34 was being rolled off the production lines in great numbers, it was already considered to be a very, very powerful tank. The Russians were already working on upgrading it, and this is the design, or this is the tank that decided to turn the T-34 into the T-34M. It had the same frontal armor, used the same gun, but the turret was redesigned. It was given new suspension. Rather than the T-34, which used a Christie suspension, the T-34M was given a torsion bars, which meant that the tank got more ground clearance. It also meant it was slightly faster, slightly more maneuverable. So as well as the new turret, new suspension, it also got a new engine. It got a V5 engine that was basically being trialed on the KV line of heavy tanks for Russia. Now, that was great because it gave the tank more horsepower to weight ratio, made its speed and maneuverability better than the T-34's, but it was also a negative, and the reason this tank never made it out of prototype, because in 1941, when this tank was being developed, April 1941, the hull had been designed, the suspension had been put in. There were 3 hulls designed for the T-34M. The turrets had been designed by May. There were 50 turrets built for these tanks because they were expected to be the T-34 successor, T-34M. The only problem was that in 1941, Russia were in desperately need of tanks. They needed to roll the T-34s off the production line as quick as possible. And while hulls were ready and while turrets were ready for this tank, the engines weren't. The V5 engine was a Russian copy of a V5 engine. It just wasn't ready for production. And as a result, the T-34M wasn't ready for production. And the Russians needed T-34s out on the battlefield. So rather than holding up factories ready to build the T-34M, waiting for an engine that had no ETA, they basically cancelled the project with just the 3 hulls, 50 turrets, and no engines built, and turned the factories back to T-34 production instead. So this is another prototype that failed because of the engine, just like the WZ-111 1.4, the first replay. But as I say, Brynje is here on Ensk, and he's driving his A-43 or T-34M, whatever you prefer to call it. And it's quite a strong tank. I've featured it on the channel before, but it's been quite some time. This is Brynje's Tier 6 go-to. This is his favorite Tier 6. He goes to this tank whenever he's platooned and playing Tier 6. You can see he's platooned with Tonzet and Steiner here. They're top tier. Absolutely lovely matchmaking. But the really nice thing about the A-43 is the fact that so many of the modules on this tank are already researched by the time you unlock it at Tier 6. If you gotten to the A-43 through the T-34, you've unlocked every gun. The 3 guns that are available for the A-43 are 3 guns that are also available for the T-34 at Tier 5. So by unlocking the guns at Tier 5, you've got the 3 guns at Tier 6. Now that's a positive and a minus because you've already got the guns unlocked. You can mount the guns straight away. The minus is that they're Tier 5 guns on a Tier 6 tank. So the A-43's penetration is sadly a little bit lacking. It's a Tier 6 that sees Tier 8s. It only gets 115 damage, which is quite low alpha-wise, and the penetration is only 125, which can struggle against Tier 8. So the penetration on this tank is not considered very good. The premium ammo gets you up to 156 millimeters of penetration, and again, that's still not very good when you consider this tank faces Tier 8. So even the premium ammunition penetration is very, very poor. So penetration-wise, the tank is not great. However, the gun is great because even though it's the same gun as the T-34, it gets double the rate of fire. So the T-34's rate of fire is just over 10 rounds a minute with the S-35 gun. I think it's the S-35. Yeah, it's the S-35. So it's a 76mm S-35. It gets 10 rounds a minute at Tier 5. At Tier 6 on the A-43, this gun gets an absolutely amazing 20 rounds a minute. There or thereabouts. If you've got equipment and crew skills, this tank can get over 20 rounds a minute. That means that its DPM, if you can do the maths, if it's got over 20 rounds a minute, is well over 2,200. It's got amazing DPM if you can pen. The tank also gets criticized for the fact it gets absolutely no armor. The armor is quite poor. I would disagree with that statement. I mean, a lot of the guides say the armor is poor on this tank, but, you know, it's an upgraded T-34. The T-34 gets 40 millimeters of sloped frontal armor, and the A-43's armor, even though it gets criticized for being quite poor, is actually 60 millimeters of frontal sloped armor. So the armor is better on this tank, much, much better. It's actually 45 millimeters on the T-34. It's 15 millimeters of frontal armor thicker than it is on the T-34 at Tier 5. So even though the armor is still not amazing, it's still better than I think a lot of people give it credit for, but it's still not good, especially when you consider you get it into Tier 8 games. The side armor is only 45 millimeters, so yeah. The other negative for this tank is it gets a huge weak spot on top, which is very, very hard to go hull down. You can shoot its cupola, and it only gets 5 degrees of gun depression. But this tank is all about its speed and mobility. It gets a great, I can't remember off the top of my head what the horsepower to weight ratio is, but the speed and mobility are very, very good. The DPM is very, very good. The rate of fire is very, very good, and you're going to see all of these things in this particular replay. We're going to go, and yeah, you just won't believe. If you haven't seen the A-43 in action before, you're not going to believe the rate of fire of this gun. The DPM, fantastic for its tier. The speed and mobility, you can see that Brynje's easily doing 55 kilometers an hour along here. He pushes forward. The view range is not amazing at 360 meters for this tank. At least, I think, off the top of my head, it's... yeah, I think it's 350 meters stock and 360 meters upgraded. I can't remember, but I think I'm right by saying it's only got 360 millimeters or meters of view range, fully upgraded. Brynje moves up, and unfortunately just the spotting mechanics means that enemy tanks are making it across the gap before he can shoot, but he does manage to get one shot into the Sherman. Oh, that's an easy 8. M4A3E8. Easy 8. So, yeah, in a lot of ways, actually, I think the Easy 8 and this tank are very, very similar. This could almost be considered the Russian Sherman, because the armor is very, very similar. The gun performance is very, very similar. The speed and mobility are perhaps a little bit better on this tank than they are on the Sherman. But yeah, I think maybe the closest comparison in World of Tanks is this is a Russian version of the Sherman Easy 8. And you're going to look at this rate of fire coming up here. Look how quickly he's able to deal out damage here. Trying to track enemy tanks. There's the lack of alpha damage, failing to track enemy tanks, but he's already done 700, he's already done 800 damage, and there's his first kill. So he's up to 850 damage, no scratch that, 900 damage, and there we go. There's 1,000 damage already. Look at the rate of fire here. It's almost like firing a British 6-pounder. Nice ammo rack to finish off the Churchill. That's his second kill. Cromwell misses a shot in the move. But Brynje hasn't really done anything yet. He hasn't been able to showcase the speed and mobility of this tank, and that, in my opinion, is probably the biggest strength. Looking for a shot under the railway lines on the Panzer T25 there, but there's still an AT-8, and that's a dangerous tank. And the AT-8 advances. Brynje was going to advance, ends up moving out in front of the AT-8's gun, but the AT-8 misses. Doesn't miss that time. Brynje maybe hung around a little bit too long, loses quite a lot of health. Cromwell's moving up, and oh, these two tanks so similar, armor-wise, gun performance-wise, rate of fire. You can see how quickly Brynje's able to swing around, start putting damage into this full health Cromwell. And for some reason the Cromwell's firing HE. Okay, Brynje got a little bit lucky, Cromwell derping HE. But he's up to 3 kills, he's up to 2,100 damage already. We are only 3 minutes into this game, and he's already done 2,100 damage. So, knowing that where most of the enemy tanks are on the minimap, keeping an eye on the minimap, it just leaves the AT-8 here. Brynje risks a shot. AT-8 is also firing HE. I mean, is there a discount on HE in the store at the moment? I don't know why the AT-7 was firing HE, but Brynje gets to his rear. The joys of a forward-facing TD. Brynje's just able to keep him tracked, and you can actually see just how poor the penetration is, that Brynje's not able to track and do damage. He's just tracking the AT-8, was unable to damage him with track shots, and as a result someone else nicks the kill, but Brynje's up to 2,500 damage. Now he's using the speed and mobility, he's getting back up to his 40-50 kilometers an hour. He's going to get around the enemy tanks, and this is what this medium tank is all about. It's all about flanking, it's all about getting to the side and rear, where its lack of penetration doesn't matter as much. So it looks like all 3 platoon mates are still alive. Brynje's on kill number 4, has spotted out Arty. A little bit dangerous driving in front of an Arty here, trying to make it difficult by using the buildings for cover. I probably would have just kept going, because we know that the M4A3E8 was on the other flank. Although it looks as if he's come back. Brynje's looking for kill number 5. Gets a shot on the move. This tank is actually very good at shooting on the move, I forgot to mention that. The A-43's another strength it has is its stats for shooting on the move are very, very good. And you can see that as Brynje takes out the Sherman for kill number 6. There's Top Gun. And he takes out the Guerrilla for kill number 7 through the wall. 3,147 damage done in just under 5 minutes. Yeah, A-43, very, very strong tank, and I think you could see why Brynje likes it as his favorite tier 6. So I have no idea how many ace tankers Brynje has the A-43, but this is just another one. He also picked up high caliber, picked up the Top Gun, finished top on XP with a huge 1679 XP, 3,147 damage done in a tank that gets criticized for the fact it's got poor penetration. But when you've got speed and mobility and great stats for shooting on the move, this is a pure medium tank. It's about getting to the side and rear and flanking and waiting for your moment to pounce, and that's what Brynje did in that game, ending up with a huge result. 38 shots fired, 34 hits and 27. Even though he did fire through some premium at the beginning of the game, he still managed to bounce 7 shots in there. That's just how bad the penetration is, even with premium ammo on this tank. But when you're top tier, it doesn't matter as much. He spotted 6, damage 8, destroyed 7, did 1,000 assistance damage to go along with his 3,000 damage of his own. He did 13 base cap points and earned, even though he was firing a little bit of premium, 16,500 credits with a premium account. Yeah, A-43, another prototype that failed thanks to its engine not arriving in time. Unlike the WZ-111 that was a prototype that failed because the engine just wasn't powerful enough. But anyway, I want to thank Phen0menaL and I want to thank Brynje for sending me those replays. I hope you guys at home enjoyed watching them, and I'll see you next time.